government today is moving in the direction of infringing upon our right to keep and bear arms. What does this word infringe mean? Well, it means to act so as to limit or undermine something, or to encroach on. To encroach is to intrude onto a person's territory, or something considered to be a right. It means to advance gradually beyond usual or acceptable limits. That's right out of the dictionary. That's what this word means. And the policies that are coming down and the things that they're doing clearly limit and restrict our freedom and liberty to own arms adequate to our self-defense. Now let me explain that. But before I get into that in some detail, the argument about regulating the right to keep and bear arms, it gets a little tricky. Because in the Second Amendment it does talk about, because there's a need for a well-regulated militia, that therefore, upon that, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Now there's some argument about what this militia is supposed to be. It just so happens that during the time of our founders and their debate and their argument about all this stuff, the word militia was used in different ways. In fact, there was an intense debate at one time over the idea of a select militia, because the concept of militia was this, that a local government, a local governing body, could call upon its citizens generally to assemble together to the defense of their borders or their rights against some aggression from outside. That was the original concept of militia. And so in one way of looking at the idea of militia, you would think of all of the people. And in fact, sometimes the founders literally said that the militia is everybody. Everybody's the militia. But that's not quite everything they said about it. Because everybody wasn't the militia every day. Or in other words, you were the militia when you were called upon to serve. See? And the concept was this. Because we need a well-regulated militia ready to serve, then therefore all of the people will not have their arms taken away. And there are two sides of this. Because of this debate that went on about a select militia. You understand what I'm saying now? Here's what they're talking about. The select militia was the idea that they would call out certain people and they would be the militia. And that was considered dangerous by many of the founders. They were very nervous about that. Because then you have an armed body under the control of a government that can be used to attack the people. And they didn't like that idea. They wanted the idea to be that when the militia is called, everybody grabs their gun and runs out into the street and goes and gets in line and gets ready to go to battle. They didn't like the idea of a select militia set apart from the rest of the people. So that's why when you're reading about this militia thing, you can get confused. Because sometimes it sounds like, well, everybody is the militia. Because they were arguing against the idea of a standing army because they consider that to be a threat to liberty. And then other times you read about militia and you get the impression that they're saying that since there is the need to have militia, therefore the people need to have the right to protect themselves. So it goes both ways. And so in the course of the debate over this whole thing, the bottom line is all of it recycles back to this main basic notion. The right of the people generally to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. That's the bottom line. They want to take that word regulated militia and take that word regulated and apply it to the general people's right to keep and bear arms. And that's not a correct reading of that Second Amendment. But that's debatable, isn't it? We're all debating that. We're going to be arguing about that and everything. But let's look at this for a little bit. Clearly, it does not seem reasonable, does it to you, that for the purpose of self-defense, an individual needs to have, let's say, a few hydrogen bombs in his closet. Right? I mean, think about it. I mean, you might not feel real comfortable if your neighbor had a hydrogen bomb. You might kind of wonder, what does he have in mind? However, it does seem reasonable to expect it might be necessary to protect yourself from multiple intruders in a case of riot, for example, or in the case of a total breakdown in law and order. That kind of scenario has happened a few times. And it may well happen again. In fact, we're moving in a direction where that might happen indeed. And so this concept that you can only have a clip that contains so many bullets, where are they going to go next? 3? What's it, restricting you to 10 now? And then somebody argues for a restriction to 5 and so on. And of course, it's all absurd. There's not anything in that kind of restriction that would have in any way changed the outcome of any of the atrocities they point to as the reason to do it. All the guys would do is carry extra clips, or not clips, extra magazines. Let's get that right. Extra magazines. They don't use clips anymore. That's an old World War II thing, I believe. But you understand what I'm saying? It's nonsense. In other words, there's nothing in any of these atrocities that justifies the idea that, well, we would have saved some lives if the guy only had a 10 capacity magazine. It wouldn't have saved any lives at all. The only thing that does do is put you in a position where if you're attacked by multiple intruders, you're at a disadvantage. You're at a very serious disadvantage in any attempt you might make to defend yourself or your home or your property for that matter.